Good morning. This is the third module in the chapter Nationalism India Class 10 CBSE. In the previous module or the previous two recorded modules, we have discussed two parts of this chapter. That is the First World War, Khilafat and non-cooperation. In the second module, we have discussed differing strands within the movement. Now this is going to be the third one towards civil disobedience. And finally, in the last one, we are going to discuss the sense of collective belonging. So this one is the third module towards civil disobedience. In the previous module which we have discussed, that was the non-cooperation or differing strands within the movement. I have especially emphasized on the various drawbacks of the movements. The various people who were participating in the movement were participating with their own specific aspiration. That's why the success which was achieved by this non-cooperation movement was not up to the mark or what was expected from that. In the 1930s, Mahatma Gandhi started the civil disobedience movement. But before we can go for that civil disobedience, let us discuss 2 or 3 points. That is the time period of 1922 to 1930. What was going on between this period, that is 1922 to 1930. The very first point which we have to discuss, we'll divide this civil disobedience movement into 3 parts. The Salt March and the civil disobedience movement, how participants saw the movement, and finally the limits of civil disobedience. If we go for the first one, the very first topic which we have to discuss is why non-cooperation movement was withdrawn. As we already know, non-cooperation movement was started in 1920s and finally it was withdrawn in 1922. So the very first question which arises is why non-cooperation movement was withdrawn. We will discuss 2 points. The very first one is movement was turning violent. A peaceful march protest was organized in Chauri Chaura. The police attacked on this march and the people got angered. Violence started. The policemen were picketed or were heraud in a police station and it was finally burnt. All the 22 policemen got killed, and this was something which was against the policy of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi wanted the movement to be totally non-violent, but with this incident and many other incidents, it seemed that the violence has started making this movement a bit violent. So Mahatma Gandhi felt that still Indian population or the masses are not well prepared for moving according to his idea of non-violence. So he thought of withdrawing the movement and preparing people again for a non-violent movement. So he withdrew the movement and started a 4-point constructive program in which he started moving from villages to villages and making people learn about the non-violent form of movements. The second point was leaders were by now tired of mass struggles. This movement, that is the non-cooperation movement, started in 1920 and continued till 1922. So it was near about 2 to 3 years and no result was coming out. So the leaders were a bit tired of these type of movements. They wanted to be a part of the legislative assemblies, but they cannot fight the election, they cannot become a part of the elections because Mahatma Gandhi has asked, we are not going to cooperate with the Britishers. And one of the ways of non-cooperating with the Britishers was to boycott the elections. But some of the Congress leaders wanted to participate in the elections. Within the Congress party, they formed a new party that was termed as Swaraj Party, and it was headed by some of the leaders like C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru. So seeing the division within the Congress, Mahatma Gandhi felt that the movement is turning violent. It means people are not very much supportive to this movement. Even in the Congress, some of the leaders were opposing this movement. So finally he thought of withdrawing the movement. The next topic we have to discuss, one more point is there. Younger leaders pressed for more radical mass aggregation. Younger leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, who has emerged as a strong leaders in the Congress, they wanted more radical mass aggregations. They felt that just if we are moving by the non-cooperative ways, the Britishers are not getting interested in our demands. So we have to start some radical mass aggregation by which we can force the Britishers to accept our demands. So finally, because of these 3 points, Mahatma Gandhi felt that he has to withdraw the movement. If we see the time period of 1920s till 1930, if we leave one exception, that is the non-cooperation movement which continued till 1922, rest of the time period was a peaceful time period. No big movement was taking part in India. The next movement only started in 1927 when Simon Commission came. So in between the time period, that is 1922 to 1927, there was a bit of silence which was felt in the Indian national movement. So let us talk about these factors. The two factors that saved Indian politics towards the late 1920s. What happened in the late 1920s that Indians again started their movement? Again, we are going to divide it into some points, that is 2 or 3 points. The very first one is the worldwide economic depression. First, let me tell you about what was this economic depression. During the First World War, as the war was fought in Europe, most of the industries, most of the agricultural land production has declined. But because it was the time period, there was a growth in demand, but the supply has came down. So in many countries which were not directly participating in the war, they took it as an opportunity and they started their production. They brought new lands under agriculture, they brought loans for agriculture, and they started agriculture in a massive scale. But once the war was over, there was a decline in demand because the production has already started in Europe. But these people who were thinking of making an opportunity out of this First World War, they have led to a mass production, but this mass production was lying in the godams and storehouse, but the market has shrunk because the demand was no more. So there was a mismatch between the demand and supply. Demand was comparatively less and supply was more. And according to the theory of economics, whenever the demand is less and supply is more, obviously the prices come down. That led to the economic depression. The same thing happened in India also. Many of the farmers have thought of making profit out of this opportunity and has led to mass production. But with the worldwide economic depression, the prices collapsed and they were not able to sell their products. On the other hand, one more point we have to discuss. After the First World War, Britishers were trying to rebuild themselves, and one of the way was the need of resources, the need of revenue. So they increased the taxes on Indian farmers. So Indian farmers were getting affected by 2 points. The first one, because of the worldwide economic depression, they were not able to sell their products, they were not able to have profit. On the other hand, Britishers were continuously increasing the taxes on them. So overall, the countryside, the rural area, or we can say a big part of the farmer group was not satisfied with the policy of Britishers. They wanted to go against that. In the book it is written, by 1930 the countryside was in turmoil. The second point which we have to discuss over here is arrival of Simon Commission. Simon Commission was formed by the British Tory government in Britain, and they formed the Simon Commission under Sir John Simon. If we go in the previous history, in 1909 the Morley Minto reforms were there. In 1919 the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms were there. So most probably by 1929 some more reforms were expected. The Britishers were a bit worried of the silence which was there in the Indian national movement. They were thinking of that maybe this silence is an indication that the Indians are preparing themselves for a bigger thing, something like 1857. So they thought of sending a commission in India which was to look into the functioning of the constitutional system in India and suggest changes. Now the problems with the Simon Commission was, it was not having any single Indian member in its format. There were 3 members and all of them were of British origin. So Indians thought that if the Simon Commission was arriving in India to suggest reforms or to suggest changes in the constitutional system of India, they must know something about India. And who can know better about India other than Indians? But Indians were not allowed in the Simon Commission. So Simon Commission was boycotted by the Indians. Wherever the Simon Commission went, it was greeted with the slogan "Go back Simon." And in one of these movements that was held in Lahore, one of these aggregation, the boycott aggregation which was held in Lahore, the mob was lathi charged by the Britishers, and Lala Lajpat Rai got hit by one of the police lathi charge, and he was seriously injured and he died. So overall, the movement created a great anger amongst the Indians. So these were the two factors that shaped Indian politics towards the late 1920s. If we come towards the next point, Congress changed its goal from Swaraj to Purn Swaraj. First of all, let me make the differentiation between Swaraj and Purn Swaraj. Before 1930s, Congress was expecting Swaraj from the British people. Their main aim was Swaraj or self-government. If we talk about self-government, it meant that Indians are going to elect their own government and it is going to rule over India, but India will become, or India will continue to be a part of the British Empire. But by 1930s, Congress changed its policy from Swaraj to Purn Swaraj. Purn Swaraj means complete independence. We are going to form our own government, as well as India will become independent. It will not remain a part of the British Empire. So let us discuss what were the circumstances which forced Congress to change its goal from Swaraj to Purn Swaraj. 4 or 5 points we are going to discuss over here, and the first one is the dominion status offered by Lord Irwin but was in an unspecified future. Going by the movements of Indian people, Lord Irwin decided to offer the Indians the dominion status. He agreed to give the Indians the dominion status, but by how much time period it will be given to Indian was not specified. So it was not this step was not able to satisfy the Indians, or we can say the leaders of Congress. The second point was radicals within the Congress became more assertive. So far, if we learn about the Congress, we can divide the Congress time period into basically 3 parts. The very first one was the moderates, the second one was the radicals, and then came the Gandhian period. So by this time period, the radicals, or we can say the young leaders of Congress, were becoming more assertive, and they didn't wanted to go only by the ways of non-cooperation. They didn't had the faith in the policy of the Britishers. The third point was liberals and moderates gradually lost their influence. The liberals and moderates who had a firm belief in the policies of Britishers, they felt that the Britishers are going to provide some relaxations to the Indians, but so far their expectations were not getting fulfilled. So the new leaders which were emerging in Congress, like Jawaharlal Nehru or Subhash Chandra Bose, who were young, they wanted to go for a big movement. They wanted to leave the policies of liberals and moderates, and they wanted to become more assertive. So these were some of the factors which finally forced the Congress to declare complete independence as its goal, and in its Lahore session, which was held in December 1929, it decided to declare 26 January 1930 to be celebrated as the Independence Day. It was decided in the Lahore session that if by 26 January 1930 the dominion status is not given to Indians, Indians will consider themselves as independent, and 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as the Independence Day. And on this particular day, an Independence Day pledge was to be taken, and all the Indians were asked to participate in this. But the problem was that the people who were, the Indian people were asked to take a pledge to struggle for complete independence, but the celebrations attracted very little attention. So overall, again the complete attention moved to Mahatma Gandhi. He was asked to find a way to relate this abstract idea of freedom to more concrete issues of everyday life. And there, as a result, he started the Salt March, or we can say the Civil Disobedience Movement. Let us discuss about the Salt March. This one was a march organized by Mahatma Gandhi from his ashram at Sabarmati, and he went up to a place called Dandi, which was a coastal area where he made salt from the sea waters, and by this he broke the salt law. The salt law said that the right of making salt was only limited to the British. The Indians cannot make the salt, and if Indians are buying the salt, they have to pay taxes. This was something which Mahatma Gandhi felt went against Indians, because we all know that the salt is an essential part of Indian food. Each and everyone of India, each and everyone belonging to any type of society in India, whether rich, poor, upper caste, lower caste, Hindu, Muslim, whatever they are, salt is an important part of their food. And if they have to pay taxes on the salt, obviously we cannot consider it as a good step. Now the question arises, why the British imparted taxes on salt. The thing is, if each and everyone is forced to pay the tax, they will come to know that they are a part of the British Empire, or the government which is ruling over India is the British government. So Mahatma Gandhi thought of starting this salt march. This can be a thing which can get the support from each and every part of the country. So Mahatma Gandhi on January 1930 sent a letter to Viceroy Lord Irwin stating 11 demands. Some of these were of general interest, some were specific demands of different classes from industrialists to peasants. Why he wrote the demands of each and every group? Because he knew if the demands are not getting fulfilled, he will get the support of each and every part of the society. And one of the most stirring of all was the demand to abolish the salt tax. He made the salt tax his target and called it the most repressive act of the British government. Mahatma Gandhi's letter was in a way an ultimatum, but Irwin was unwilling to negotiate, because Mahatma Gandhi has given a date to Irwin that if by this date, if the demand of Mahatma Gandhi is not been fulfilled, he will start the civil disobedience movement with the starting of Salt March. But Irwin was not at all interested in fulfilling his demands. Mahatma Gandhi's letter was in a way an ultimatum, but Irwin was unwilling to negotiate. So Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March on March 12, 1930 from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, that is a small coastal village in Gujarat. He started with 78 followers and thousands joined him on his 240 miles route. One of the very interesting question which I generally face from the students, why he started this march on foot? Why he went from Sabarmati to Dandi? He could have opted to go by a vehicle or to go by the train, but why he started this pedal march from Sabarmati to Dandi? The simplest answer is he wanted to contact as many people as he can, and to give them the idea of civil disobedience movement, to prepare them for the movement. Earlier experience of non-cooperation movement said that the people were turning violent, so this time he wanted to clearly give the message to the people and to prepare them for the movement. That's why he started this march and went from village to village, making people aware of this movement. Finally, on 6th April, he reached Dandi and ceremonially violated the law, manufacturing salt by boiling seawater. If we come towards the next heading, that is the civil disobedience movement. Let me first make you clear what was the difference between non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement. In the non-cooperation movement, Indians were asked not to cooperate with the Britishers, but they were never asked to break the laws of the Britishers. But as I have already told, that 26th January 1930 was to be celebrated as the Independence Day, and Indians were not asked not to follow the British rules because now they were independent. So Mahatma Gandhi started the civil disobedience movement, in which he asked the common people not to follow the rules made by the British government, or we can say they were not expected to pay the taxes to the British government, or it also included the aims of non-cooperation, that we are not going to cooperate with the Britishers. So this was a bit different. Non-cooperation only asked the common people not to cooperate with the Britishers, but civil disobedience movement asked the Indians to break the laws made by the British people. I have divided this heading into three parts. The very first one is people's participation. In this movement, people were asked to refuse cooperation to British and to break colonial laws. People broke salt law as it was started by Mahatma Gandhi. He was the first person to break the salt law. Foreign clothes were boycotted and liquor shops were picketed. We have already discussed these 2 points in the non-cooperation movement. The same thing was followed in civil disobedience movements also. People refused to pay revenue and taxes. Officials resigned. Forest people violated forest law. This was something new in this movement, because in the non-cooperation movement people were not asked to deny the revenue and taxes or to violate the laws. But in the civil disobedience movement, they were not paying the taxes as well as violating the laws. If we come towards the second heading, that is government's reaction, how the government reacted to this movement. As the movement started and the government was not able to control the movement, the very first action government took was to arrest the topmost leaders. They believed that if the topmost leaders were not there, the movement will go without leadership, and if there is no leadership, people will go back to their homes, they will withdraw from the movement. So they started with arresting the topmost leaders of the Congress. But it gave a negative result that was not expected from the British. For example, violence erupted in Peshawar when Abdul Ghaffar Khan was arrested over there. Peshawar was a part of the northwestern frontier province, and Abdul Ghaffar Khan was an important Congress leader of Congress over here. When he was arrested, the people turned violent over there. Angry crowds demonstrated in the streets of Peshawar. They faced armored cars and police firings in which many were killed. Same way, when Gandhi was arrested in Solapur, that is in Maharashtra, the workers attacked British offices, or we can say whatever was having the British symbol was attacked. For example, police post, municipal buildings, law courts and railway stations, all structures that symbolize British rule. Finally, government was forced to go to start an repressive action, and peaceful satyagrahis were attacked, women and children were beaten, and more than 1 lakh people were arrested. Because of this situation which was arising, Lord Irwin asked Mahatma Gandhi to come down for the negotiations to work out a solution out of this movement, and finally a pact was signed between Mahatma Gandhi and Lord Irwin that was termed as Gandhi-Irwin Pact. In the Gandhi-Irwin Pact said, or both the parties has to agree for some of the solutions. Gandhi consented to participate in a round table conference which was to be held in London, and the government agreed to release all the political prisoners. Here we have to make one thing very clear. Government agreed only to release the political prisoners against whom there was no charges of criminal cases. Means they were not charged against for the violence or anything like that. The negotiations broke down. Gandhi went for the second round table conference in London. Then negotiations started over there, but finally it broke down and Gandhi returned disappointed. Why it broke down will be discussed later. Gandhi relaunched the civil disobedience movement before going for the round table conference as a part of the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. He has withdrawn the civil disobedience movement, but when he came back disappointed from the round table conference, he again wanted to start the civil disobedience movement. He started it, but by 1934 the movement lost its momentum, and overall this one was the end of civil disobedience movement. If we turn towards the next part of this civil disobedience movement, that is how participants saw the movement. We are going to divide this in some sub parts. Like the very first one which we have to discuss is the rich peasant communities. The rich peasant communities were hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. As I have already told, because of the worldwide economic depression, there was a large surplus and they were not able to sell this because of the declining prices. So they were hard hit by the trade depression and falling prices. They wanted the government to give some of the relaxation in the taxes. Some of the communities of the rich peasant communities were like the Patidars of Gujarat and Jats of Uttar Pradesh, who were active in the movement. They wanted the British government to give them some relaxations in the taxes, but the British government refused to give them any relaxation. That finally led to the starting of the movement or the participation of these people in the civil disobedience movement. But these rich peasant communities were deeply disappointed with the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, because in the Gandhi-Irwin Pact their demands were not given any, their demands were not fulfilled. Mahatma Gandhi finally decided to withdraw the civil disobedience movement without consulting the demands of these rich peasant communities, or there was no fulfillment of their demands. So they were deeply disappointed with the Gandhi-Irwin Pact. And finally, when the movement was relaunched by the Gandhi in 1934, these people decided that they are not going to participate in the movement. The second community which we have to discuss is the poorer peasantry. The farmers group we have divided into two parts. One was the rich peasant communities, another one was the poorer peasantry. The poorer peasantry was not only interested in giving the relaxation in the taxes, they want some other relaxations also. For example, because of the economic depression, small tenants found it difficult to pay their rent, and they wanted the unpaid rent to the landlord to be remitted. To be remitted means it should be made over, and the peasants should not be forced to pay these type of taxes. But the Congress was unwilling to support no rent campaigns in most places. Now the question arises why the Congress was not interested in supporting no rent campaigns in most places, as the rents were mostly collected by the jamidars and they have to pay it to the Britishers. If Congress was going to support the no rent campaigns, obviously jamidars would get angry with the Congress, or they were not expected to support the Congress. These people were the main fund providers to the Congress, and these people were having an active control over the society. So if Congress was going to support the no rent campaigns, jamidars were going to withdraw their support to the Congress, and Congress was going expected to lose the funds as well as the active support of the jamidars. So Congress was not willing to support the no rent campaigns, and this somewhere, what we can say, this somewhere made the poorer peasantry angry, and they withdrew from the civil disobedience movement. The next group which we have to discuss is the business class. During the First World War time period, that is 1914 to 1919, these people have made large profits by exporting Indian goods to the Britishers, because Britishers were in need of these products but were not able to produce these products in Britain. But once the First World War was over, the situations has turned, and Indian businessmen were not able to earn that much profit. So they reacted against colonial policies that restricted their business activities. They wanted protection against import of foreign goods. Because of the import of foreign goods, they were not able to sell their own products, and a rupee sterling foreign exchange ratio that would discourage imports. There was a big gap between the value of Indian rupee and the value of sterling. So whenever you are exporting or importing, you have to keep an eye on the values of both the currencies, and because of this gap, somewhere Indian producers or the Indian business class were losing their profit. So they wanted this thing to be streamlined or to be in their favor. They formed their own organizations. They attacked colonial control over the Indian economy and supported the civil disobedience movement. Some of the organizations they formed were, for example, they formed the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries in 1927. Some of their prominent leaders were like Purushottam Thakurdas and G.D. Birla, and they attacked colonial control over the Indian economy and supported the civil disobedience movement when it was first launched. But very soon these people started withdrawing their support from the civil disobedience movement. As the movement was Going on, they were worried of the militant activities because I have already told that some of the Congress leaders were becoming very assertive, so that they thought that as the non-cooperation movement had turned violent, it can be that the civil disobedience movement can also turn violent. So they were worried of the militant activities, prolonged disruption of business, and a growing influence of socialism in the Congress. Here I will again like to discuss the growing influence of socialism in the Congress. If more of the leaders of Congress were turning towards socialism, the businessmen felt that they are going to support the workers. And if they are going to support the workers, there will be a decline in the profit of the businessmen. That's why they were worried about the growing influence of socialism in Congress. And this finally forced the businessmen to withdraw their support from the movement. The next group which we have to discuss is the industrial working class. The industrial working class was not very much actively involved in the civil disobedience movement. Only in some part of the country they were actively involved. For example, in the areas of Nagpur. Other than the workers of Nagpur region, workers were not much interested in the movement. The workers who were interested in the movement started their own movements against low wages and poor working conditions. We all know this was the time period of capitalism, and the main way of earning profit in the capitalism was to exploit the workers. So the workers started their own movements against low wages and poor working conditions. Congress felt that if it supported workers, then it would alienate industrialists, and that would divide the anti-imperial forces. Again, it was the same thing like as I have already discussed. The Congress was not willing to support the poor peasantry, because if they are going to support the poor peasantry, the jamidars would get angered, and they were the main source of funds. Same way, if the Congress was going to support the workers, that will alienate the industrialists, and again industrialists were a powerful group. They were one of the main sources of the funds which was required to continue the movement, and that would also divide the anti-imperial forces, the forces which were working against the imperial government or the British government. So Congress was not that much interested in supporting the workers, and because Congress was not willing to support the workers were also not much interested in the civil disobedience. One more group which has participated actively in the civil disobedience movement of and which we have to discuss is the participation of women. Women have always actively participated in the various movements launched by Mahatma Gandhi, whether it was non-cooperation movement, and the same was there with the civil disobedience movement. Women participated in protest march, they manufactured salt, picketed foreign cloth and liquor shops, and they began to see the service to the nation as their sacred duty. But overall we can say that they haven't got a good response from Congress for their participation. We can divide it into 2 points. They never got good response from the Congress, as Gandhiji was convinced that it was the duty of women to look after home. What Gandhiji felt that if women have taken the responsibilities of home, if they are looking towards the responsibilities towards home, men folks will get free from the responsibilities, and they can have an active participation on the movement. They can take the complete responsibilities of the women. Same way, Congress was keen only on their symbolic presence. We can see this by the thing that the topmost leadership of Congress was always held by the men. The president of Congress, which was the topmost seat, only 2 exceptions are there, that is the Annie Besant and Sarojini Naidu. Other than that, each and every time the seat was occupied by the men. So we can say that Congress was keen only on their symbolic presence. So this somewhere alienated the women from the movement. Next time, in the next module, we are going to discuss the limits of civil disobedience movement, and the 4th part of this chapter, that is the sense of collective belonging.